the thing from the marsh in the heart of the forgotten countryside, where the sun rarely pierced the thick canopy of ancient trees, lay a sprawling marshland known as Black Hollow. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, warning children to stay away from its treacherous bogs and murky waters. It was said that something lurked within the depths, an entity that thrived in darkness and despair. The legend began centuries ago with the disappearance of a small village. One fateful night, a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the homes and their inhabitants whole. When dawn broke, the village was gone, leaving only a vast expanse of marshland. The few who survived spoke of a creature and abomination that feasted on fear and sorrow. They claimed it could mimic the voices of lost loved ones, drawing unsuspecting souls into its watery grave. As time passed, the tale faded into folklore, but the marsh remained a place of dread. Few dared to venture near it, but curiosity has a way of luring the brave or the foolish. Among them was a group of 4 friends: Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Jake. They were thrill seekers, always searching for the next adrenaline rush. When they heard about Black Hollow, they couldn't resist. "Come on, it's just an old story," Mark said, his bravado masking his unease. "We'll go in, take some pictures, and leave. No big deal." As twilight descended, they arrived at the edge of the marsh. The air was thick with humidity and the stench of decay. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced among the twisted trees. Despite their bravado, an unsettling chill crept into their bones. "Let's stick together," Emily suggested nervously. "I don't like this place." "Don't be such a wuss," Jake scoffed, already stepping toward the water's edge. "It's just mud and reeds." As they ventured deeper into Black Hollow, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, filled with an unnatural silence that pressed against their ears. The friends took turns snapping pictures, trying to capture the eerie beauty of the marsh. But with each click of the camera, an unsettling feeling settled over them. Suddenly, Sarah stopped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others paused, straining to listen. A faint sound echoed through the trees, a soft, sorrowful wail that seemed to come from all directions. It was a voice they recognized. "Ma'am," Mark called out hesitantly, his heart racing. The voice sounded just like his mother's. "Mark," it cried again, filled with desperation. "Stay here," he shouted to the others before dashing toward the sound. "Mark, wait," Emily cried out, but he was already lost in the thickening fog. The remaining 3 exchanged worried glances before following him into the darkness. As they moved deeper into the marsh, the wailing grew louder, twisting into anguished cries that chilled their bones. "Mark," Jake shouted as they stumbled through the muck. "Where are you?" But there was no response, only the echoing cries that seemed to mock their fear. The fog thickened around them, obscuring their vision and disorienting their senses. Then they heard it, a low growl emanating from behind them. They turned to see a dark shape emerging from the shadows, its form indistinct and shifting like smoke. Panic surged through them as they realized they were not alone. "Run!" Emily screamed as they bolted in different directions, desperate to escape whatever haunted them in Black Hollow. Sarah sprinted through the marsh, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the creature close behind her, a slithering mass that moved with unnatural speed. She stumbled over roots and fallen branches, but pushed herself onward, driven by pure instinct. Suddenly, she found herself at a clearing where the moonlight broke through the canopy. In its pale glow stood Mark, staring blankly at something in front of him. "Mark!" she yelled, but he didn't respond. As she approached him cautiously, she noticed what had captivated him, a figure rising from the depths of the marsh. It was humanoid, but grotesque. Its skin was slick and dark like oil, glistening under the moonlight. Its eyes were hollow voids that seemed to draw in light rather than reflect it. "Mark!" Sarah shouted again, shaking him by the shoulders. He blinked as if waking from a trance. What is that?" he stammered, fear etched across his face. Before they could react further, Emily and Jake burst into the clearing, panting and wide-eyed with terror. "It's coming," Jake gasped. "We need to get out of here." As if summoned by their fear, the creature let out a deafening roar that echoed across Black Hollow. It lunged toward them with terrifying speed, its elongated limbs stretching impossibly far. "Run!" Sarah screamed as they turned to flee once more. They raced through the marshland, weaving between trees and avoiding patches of quicksand that threatened to swallow them whole. The cries of lost souls filled the air around them, voices of those who had vanished into the depths. Over the years. "Where do we go?" Emily cried out in desperation. "Back to where we entered," Mark shouted back. "It's our only chance." But as they ran, the ground beneath them began to shift and tremble. The marsh seemed alive, roots twisted around their ankles like serpents trying to pull them under. The creature pursued relentlessly, its growls echoing in their ears as they fought against despair. Finally, they stumbled upon a narrow path leading back to solid ground, their only hope for escape. With every ounce of strength left in them, they sprinted toward it. But just as they reached the path's edge, Mark tripped over a root and fell hard onto the ground. "Mark!" Sarah screamed as she turned back to help him. "No, keep going," he shouted back desperately. "You'll hold it off." Tears streamed down her face as she hesitated for a moment before realizing she had no choice. With a heavy heart, she turned and ran with Emily and Jake toward safety. Behind them, Mark struggled to rise as the creature loomed over him. Its breath was foul and hot against his skin as it reached out with clawed hands. In his final moments, he understood the stories were true. This was no ordinary monster, but something born of darkness itself. As Sarah reached the edge of Black Hollow and stumbled onto solid ground, she looked back one last time. The marsh was silent now, no cries or growls echoed through its depths. Only an eerie stillness remained. They had escaped, but at what cost? Days turned into weeks after that night. The three friends returned to their lives, but were haunted by nightmares and memories of Black Hollow. They often found themselves staring at their phones, scrolling through photos taken during their ill-fated adventure. One evening, Sarah decided to review their pictures from that night. As she flipped through them, her heart sank when she noticed something strange in one shot, a dark shape lurking behind them in the background. Panic gripped her as she zoomed in on the figure, hollow eyes staring back at her from within the shadows of Black Hollow. It was watching them still. And then came a knock at her door, a familiar voice calling her name softly from outside. Sarah, her heart raced as she recognized it. It was Mark's voice. She hesitated for a moment before opening the door slowly. But when she stepped outside into the night air, there was only darkness waiting for her, a darkness that seemed to pulse with life. And then she heard it again, a low growl echoing through the silence of Black Hollow. Sarah stood frozen at the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The darkness outside felt alive, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. The voice calling her name was unmistakable, yet it sent chills down her spine. Sarah echoed again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Mark," she called out hesitantly, stepping into the night. The air was thick and heavy, filled with an unsettling stillness. She squinted into the darkness, searching for any sign of him. But there was only silence. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, something dark slipping between the trees at the edge of her yard. Panic surged through her as she took a step back, instinctively reaching for her phone. The dim light illuminated her trembling hands, and she quickly turned on the flashlight feature, illuminating the path ahead. "Mark," she shouted again, fear lacing her voice. "Where are you?" No response came, only the rustling of leaves, as if something was watching her from the shadows. She felt a cold breeze sweep through the yard, chilling her to the bone. The memories of that night in Black Hollow flooded back Mark's desperate face, the creature's grotesque form, the haunting cries of lost souls. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks, she murmured to herself, trying to steady her breathing. But deep down, she knew that whatever had happened in the marsh was far from over. With a deep breath, Sarah turned back toward the house, intending to call Emily and Jake. But as she reached for the doorknob, a loud crash echoed from behind her. She spun around, heart racing, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Mark. "Sarah," he gasped, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. "You have to run. It's here." Before she could respond, he lunged forward, grabbing her wrist and pulling her away from the door. "We need to get to the car. Now." "What are you talking about? What happened?" Sarah stammered, struggling to keep up with his frantic pace. "There's no time. It followed me. I thought I could escape it, but it's not done with us yet." His voice trembled as he glanced over his shoulder, panic etched across his features. They raced toward the driveway, but as they reached the car, Sarah noticed something horrifying. Jake and Emily were nowhere to be seen. "Where are they?" she cried out. "I don't know. I thought they were with you," Mark shouted back, slamming his hand against the car's roof in frustration. "We have to go. We can't wait for them." "No, we can't leave them," Sarah insisted, torn between fear and loyalty. Just then, a low growl rumbled from the trees behind them. The sound sent a jolt of terror through Sarah's veins. "We don't have time to argue," Mark yelled, his eyes wide with fear. "It's coming." Without thinking, Sarah jumped into the driver's seat and fumbled with the keys. Her hands shook as she inserted them into the ignition and turned. The engine roared to life, but her heart sank as she realized they were still in danger. "Get in," she shouted at Mark as he climbed into the passenger seat. Just as he slammed the door shut, a shadow loomed over them, a massive shape creeping closer from the darkness. "Go! Go!" Mark yelled, and Sarah slammed on the gas pedal. The tires screeched as they tore down the driveway and onto the main road. They drove in silence for what felt like an eternity, adrenaline pumping through their veins. But as they reached the outskirts of town, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that they weren't safe yet. "Did we lose it?" she asked breathlessly, glancing at Mark. "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaky. "But we can't stop now." They sped past familiar landmarks, the diner where they used to hang out and the park where they played as kids. Everything felt surreal in their current state of panic. "Should we go to Emily's house?" Sarah suggested hesitantly. "No," Mark shook his head. "We need to regroup somewhere safe. Let's head to my place, it's more secluded." As they drove deeper into the countryside toward Mark's house, an unsettling silence enveloped them once more. The night felt oppressive, even the moon seemed to hide behind thick clouds. Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed violently on her lap. She picked it up to see a message from Emily. "Help! We're at Black Hollow." Panic surged through her as she read it aloud. "They're still there. We have to go back," Mark exclaimed. "What? Are you crazy?" Sarah shot back. "That thing is still out there. I don't care. They're our friends. We can't leave them," Mark shouted back, determination shining in his eyes. With a heavy heart and a lump in her throat, Sarah made a sharp turn back toward Black Hollow. The drive felt agonizingly long as dread settled over them like a thick fog. When they arrived at the marsh once more, it was eerily quiet to quiet. The moonlight cast long shadows across the water's surface, and every rustle of leaves sent chills down their spines. "Emily! Jake!" Sarah called out as they stepped out of the car. "Stay close," Mark warned, gripping a flashlight tightly in his hand as they ventured into the marsh together. They moved cautiously through the underbrush, scanning their surroundings for any sign of their friends. The wailing cries that had haunted them before were absent now, replaced by an unsettling silence that felt heavy with anticipation. Then they heard it, a faint whisper carried on the wind, echoing through the trees. "Help us, did you hear that?" Sarah whispered urgently. Mark nodded grimly. "It's coming from deeper inside." They pressed on, following the sound until they reached a clearing where the moonlight illuminated a small patch of ground surrounded by thick fog. In its center stood a gnarled tree with twisted roots that seemed to reach out like fingers grasping for something or someone. And there they were, Emily and Jake, standing transfixed before the tree, their faces pale and eyes glazed over as if entranced by something unseen. "Emily! Jake!" Mark shouted as he rushed forward. But as they approached, a chilling realization washed over them. Their friends were not alone. The creature loomed behind them, its grotesque form blending seamlessly into the shadows of the marsh. "No!" Sarah screamed as she grabbed Mark's arm and pulled him back just in time. The creature let out a deafening roar that echoed through Black Hollow, sending vibrations through their bones. "It wants them!" Mark shouted desperately. "We have to break whatever hold it has on them." Without hesitation, Sarah sprinted toward Emily and Jake, calling their names repeatedly. "Fight it! Come back to us!" As she reached for Emily's hand, she felt an icy grip tighten around her wrist. The creature had extended its clawed hand toward her. In that moment of contact, visions flooded her mind, images of despair and loss from countless souls consumed by Black Hollow. "No!" she cried out against its influence, focusing on her friends instead. "You are not alone. We're here." Mark joined her side, shouting encouragements to Jake as he struggled against whatever force held him captive. "Remember our adventures. Remember who you are." Slowly but surely, Emily blinked as if waking from a dream. "Sarah," she gasped. "What's happening?" "We're here. You have to fight it," Sarah urged, with newfound determination igniting within them. Emily and Jake began to break free from their trance-like state. The creature roared in fury as its grip weakened. "Now, together!" Mark shouted as they all joined hands for friends against one monstrous entity. The creature lunged forward again, but this time they were ready. Channeling their bond and shared memories of laughter and friendship, they pushed back against its dark influence. A blinding light erupted from their joined hands, a surge of warmth and strength that illuminated Black Hollow like never before. The creature howled in agony as it was engulfed by their combined light. In that moment of unity, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of hope wash over her. The darkness that had haunted them for so long was finally receding. As dawn broke over Black Hollow, the creature dissipated into mist, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. They stood together in disbelief as sunlight filtered through the trees. "For the first time in centuries, we did it," Jake whispered in awe. But as they turned to leave the marsh behind them forever, Sarah couldn't shake off a lingering feeling of unease. They had escaped, but at what cost? As they walked back toward their car with renewed strength and hope for tomorrow, one thing was clear: some legends never truly die, they merely wait for another chance to rise again.